Chaotic, confusing, captivating. That's exactly how most fans would describe the atmosphere swirling around the UFC right now. From sudden rematches in the bantamweight division to unexpected injuries toppling marquee matchups, it seems like a tornado of rumors and confirmations keeps hitting our feeds every time we refresh. Even more intriguing are the former champions trying to reclaim lost glory, some openly regretting past decisions, and others calling out the UFC for disrespect. Whatever your stance, there's no denying that the next few months will be a roller coaster, and it's all unfolding faster than anyone expected. This story starts in the wake of UFC Seattle, where new announcements, controversies, and wild speculation have taken center stage. But that's not the whole picture, as shocking fight news rolls in for UFC 315, and as certain fighters make critical career moves or missteps, everyone from diehard devotees to casual fans is left wondering who will emerge on top. Stay with me, because there's more at stake than just rankings or championship belts. Legacies are on the line, and some of the sport's biggest names are walking a tightrope between triumph and collapse. Shortly after UFC Seattle, Dana White dropped a bombshell. We might be seeing reigning bantamweight champion Merab Dvalishvili defend his title in a rematch against none other than Sean O'Malley. Hints were subtle at first. Dana suggested it in passing, as he usually does, leaving fans guessing, but the rumor mill shifted into overdrive once Merab posted a clever social media skit. In it, he teased a scenario that practically confirmed he's on track for a second showdown with Sean. Why is this such a big deal? Their rivalry might still feel fresh, but the tension has been building for years, ever since fans first realized the bantamweight division was bursting with top-tier talents who could dethrone each other at any moment. Merab's grinding, relentless style clashes dramatically with Sean's slick striking, making their fights a spectacle of two very different philosophies. Though nothing is signed yet, the possibility alone has set forums on fire. Anticipation is the name of the game, and if or when they meet, it could shape the direction of the entire weight class. But that's only the beginning of the madness.
Sean O'Malley looking likely to rematch Merab, right? And we just got the Sandhagen announcement too. I'm kind of curious how that matchmaking came to be. Was the idea always, again, I don't think the O'Malley one is official yet, right? But we're leaning towards that. How did we get there with so many different options? I think for Sean O'Malley, we could have done maybe an Aldo possibility. There's, especially with him, so many options.
They want to fight each other. I think people want to see it.
Amid the excitement of a potential bantamweight brawl, fresh news emerged about the UFC 315 card. Fans who were clamoring for more big showdowns got multiple. First up, Jose Aldo, one of the most revered names in MMA, has been booked against Ayman Zahabi. On paper, it's a matchup that might please those who crave technical battles, but a vocal section of the fandom is already up in arms. Aldo, a legend with an unmatched resume at featherweight and beyond, is coming off a split decision loss to Mario Bautista, and many believe he deserves a marquee opponent, not another prospect or an up-and-comer. People are questioning whether the UFC is squandering Aldo's final years in the sport by failing to schedule him against legacy opponents or fellow big-name fighters. Meanwhile, Jessica Andrade aims to bounce back against Jasmine Jasudavicius, hoping to prove she's still a force after her recent defeat. Over in heavyweight territory, Muhammad Usman looks to halt his losing streak against an undefeated Hamdi Abdelwahab. Though he struggled lately, Usman's name still carries weight, and Abdelwahab's pristine record only raises the stakes. Also on the docket is a potentially explosive lightweight scrap between Guram Kutateladze and Kaue Fernandez, two fighters fresh off impressive wins. Sometimes these lesser hyped matchups end up stealing the spotlight, and that's why fans are keeping a close watch. Still, despite this lineup, the conversation keeps drifting back to another pivotal figure, Henry Cejudo. His situation is one of the most puzzling in modern MMA. Henry Cejudo's legacy is both extraordinary and perplexing. After all, this is a man who walked away from the sport in the prime of his career, holding not one but two championship titles. Daniel Cormier recently called Cejudo's decision to retire in 2021 of the most regrettable moves in MMA history. Why? Because it looked less like a confident farewell and more like a gamble for leverage. Cejudo may have hoped the UFC would beg him to return for big money, but the organization simply moved on, leaving 2 vacant belts behind. When Henry finally did come back, the landscape had changed drastically. He's now on a 3-fight skid, and each loss has chipped away at the once invincible aura he carried. The latest was a controversial battle against Song Yadong, where Cejudo was on the receiving end of an accidental eye poke. That ended the fight prematurely, and the decision ultimately went to Song. Cejudo felt the entire situation was mishandled. No point was taken from Song, and Henry says he was left with no choice but to stop due to double vision. He insists he didn't quit, but believes Dana White and Hunter Campbell might see it differently. Despite the setbacks, he's eager for one last match, maybe against Peter Yan, to prove he still belongs at the top. But he's not the only person talking about unfinished business in the UFC. In fact, Paddy Pimblett has something to say, and he's pointing his words directly at Ilia Topuria.
And I know it's hard, right? To go back, well, everybody could have done it different. We can always judge. But was that one of the worst decisions in the history of mixed martial arts, Chael? To walk away then, in the middle of the pandemic, where people were becoming stars. Guys were becoming stars because nothing else was on television. You got to fight in front of the world because the world had stopped. And Henry decided that he just didn't want to do it again.
Would I love to run it back with Song 100%? I would love to run it back with him, but if I can run it back with him, I know Jan said that May is open. I'd love that fight with Peter Yan. You know, I'm sure Jason's a great guy too, but you know, it's shitty on his part that they say all this, and by the time the fight goes down, something goes down. Oh, take your time. Oh, you're fine.
Paddy Pimblett never shies away from drama. He's a natural talker, and this time, his target is Ilia Topuria. According to Paddy, Ilia has no place at lightweight, believes he's overhyped, and claims he's just another fighter trying to replicate Conor McGregor's meteoric rise. As usual, Paddy didn't sugarcoat his statements, calling Ilia a bleep lad who lacks the size and power to contend with true lightweights. But is this just trash talk, or could there be truth behind Paddy's confident claims? Topuria, for his part, has shown nothing but consistent improvements and a vicious finishing ability. Still, it's uncertain if he'd land an instant title shot by jumping divisions, especially when the lightweight ranks are stacked with proven veterans. The real twist here is that Paddy has a fight lined up with Michael Chandler at UFC 314. Chandler, a knockout artist who's faced some of the toughest guys in the sport, has warned Paddy that he's about to experience a whole new level of intensity. Pimblett has been clipped before, notably in his UFC debut, and Chandler's striking is nothing to scoff at. It's a test of whether Paddy can back up his talk and maintain the hype around him. But while some fighters are gearing up for war, others are being forced to sit on the sidelines.
Yeah, I mean that's an understatement.
Oh, I just
with all due respect, and I don't like to overemphasize or overboast, but my goodness, I have done nothing but train myself in violent hand-to-hand combat since I was 14 years old, and I have fought the best of the best, from former champions to guys who are absolute psychopaths like Justin Gaethje, and whoever that guy was. I forget what his name was and who he was, but he don't hit half as hard as I do. So we'll see. We'll test his chin. We'll test his gall. We'll test his championship mentality. We'll test his cardio. We will test his heart.
Dan Hooker is known for stepping up against the toughest names in the lightweight division, but fate dealt him a bad hand, quite literally, before his scheduled fight with Justin Gaethje at UFC 313. Hooker revealed he suffered a broken hand during sparring, effectively sidelining him from one of the most anticipated showdowns of the year. Almost immediately, the rumor mill kicked into gear, with several top lightweights volunteering to fill the vacancy. Renato Moicano hopped on social media to say 2 weeks was enough time to train, while Rafael Fiziev publicly requested a rematch against Gaethje, harking back to their previous clash. Mateusz Gamrot also threw his name in the ring, reminding people that he had a closely contested fight with Hooker before. Even Islam Makhachev teased a possible stand-in role, posting a cryptic photo captioned, "Someone needs to be put out." John Anik and Kenny Florian didn't hold back on their podcast, expressing disappointment and questioning whether Hooker could have prevented such a severe injury with better hand wraps or equipment. Accidents happen in MMA, but fans and commentators alike lament the timing, as the fight had all the elements of an instant classic. Gaethje hasn't hidden his frustration either, sharing a quick update that he's waiting on a new opponent to salvage the card. As another beloved fighter endures a career detour, the conversation once again circles back to how legends in the sport are handled. That brings us to Jose Aldo and the debate over how the UFC is matching him up these days.
Another break for Hooker. You know, he's had broken arms, he's had all sorts of injuries, and it looks like he's out.
I'm disappointed. This is why we can't have nice things. Yeah, I mean, listen, these guys are made for each other. We talked about this before, and it's unfortunate, man. I think on another level, I'm also kind of confused as how, you know, pro MMA fighters hurt their hand to that extent where they can't continue. You know, it's like, are we not wrapping our hands? Are we not using the proper gloves and throwing way too hard for the kind of equipment that we have? And of course, freak things happen.
Jose Aldo's name commands respect across all corners of the MMA world. A longtime featherweight kingpin, he's held in the highest esteem for his dominance and heart-stopping performances. That's why fans were baffled and enraged to see him matched with Mario Bautista in his recent fight, and now scheduled against Ayman Zahabi for UFC 315. From the outside, these matchups seem more like tests for rising contenders, rather than the marquee fights a legend like Aldo warrants. Critics point to the UFC's willingness to offer a blockbuster bout like John Jones versus Stipe Miocic, while simultaneously handing Aldo opponents who are neither established legends nor major fan draws. Social media lit up in protest, with some calling this the most disrespectful matchmaking they've ever seen. High-profile MMA personalities have jumped in too, suggesting that Aldo should be in fights against similarly iconic names, like Dominic Cruz for instance, instead of being placed in what many consider mismatch or trap fights that don't elevate his legacy. While it's always possible Aldo and Zahabi deliver an unforgettable war, the community feels it's a far cry from the super fights that Aldo's storied career deserves. It's yet another reminder that the UFC's approach to booking can delight, confuse, and outrage all at once.
Sim, muito bom te ver, good to see you, bye. Tô muito feliz, eu acho que a galera esperava por você, eu tava muito confiante, muito bem treinado, eu acho que eu só tenho que agradecer a minha equipe, Dedé, Falcão.
Quando você se aposentou, você achou que um momento como esse seria possível ainda no Rio, fazendo uma luta assim, diante desse público?
Não, isso eu nem imaginava, cara, nem nos meus melhores sonhos. Eu acho que quando eu parei a última vez que eu estive aqui, vendo o evento, eu jamais imaginava que voltaria aqui e encontrar esse público.
I couldn't imagine this in my wildest dreams, you know. It's amazing to be back here in the city I live in, the city I love, with all these people here. I feel flattered.
With so much going on, it's hard to keep track. On one hand, we've got a potentially explosive bantamweight rematch between Merab Dvalishvili and Sean O'Malley that could redefine the future of that division. On the other, Henry Cejudo is still scrambling for redemption, all while insisting he never truly gave up. Paddy Pimblett is talking a mile a minute about Ilia Topuria, but in a few short weeks, he faces the challenge of his life against Michael Chandler, someone widely regarded as one of the hardest hitters around. Dan Hooker's injury tossed an eagerly awaited scrap with Justin Gaethje into jeopardy, prompting a pack of lightweight contenders to scramble for the spotlight. And then there's Jose Aldo, a living legend whose matchmaking continues to spark outrage among fans who believe he deserves a final run of epic confrontations. This swirling, unpredictable mess of storylines is precisely why the UFC never fails to captivate. Every time you think you know what's coming, an injury, a shocking upset, or a behind-the-scenes power play changes the entire game. Fighters try to secure their spots and prove they're the best, but luck, timing, and backstage negotiations are just as critical as in-cage skills. In the end, only one thing is certain: fans are in for a wild ride. As these narratives move forward, everyone is waiting to see which fights are finally signed, which rumors turn out to be red herrings, and whether some of these contentious issues, like Henry Cejudo's standing with the UFC or Jose Aldo's fight schedule, get resolved in a way that satisfies both the fighters and their audiences. Every fighter highlighted here stands at a crossroads. For some, a victory could reignite a fading star. For others, another defeat might close a chapter in their careers for good. How do you see it playing out? Is the UFC making questionable booking choices that disrespect the legends of the sport, or are these matchups poised to become hidden gems that surprise everyone? Will Merab Dvalishvili and Sean O'Malley rekindle a rivalry for the ages, or could an injury throw a wrench into that plan too? And what of Cejudo? Does he get the big-name redemption match he's seeking, or will his retirement gamble forever overshadow him? The UFC is a kaleidoscope of drama, skill, and strategy, and we're only scratching the surface of all the twists coming our way. If you're looking for more breaking updates, behind-the-scenes stories, and heated debates, stick around. The chaos is far from over. In fact, it's just getting started. If you've enjoyed this deep dive, consider leaving a comment with your take on Aldo's matchmaking, or whether Paddy Pimblett can truly handle Michael Chandler's power. Above all, stay tuned, because in the world of MMA, everything can change in a moment, and you won't want to miss what happens next.